Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are looking at this 89 Camaro, the IROC project once again. Today we're going to look at the door pins. As you can see, if you look at the door, there's a much bigger gap up top. If you go at the bottom, it closes in quite a bit. And the door also, when you go to close it, it closes kind of hard. And you can see the door striker. If you look at the top, you can see that's been getting worn, hitting the top of the hinge here. You can also see the door's grinding on the bottom ground effect here. So the door is starting to lean to the bottom, so this bottom edge is hanging lower than where it should be. Back of the door from the weight is hanging down. Fairly common. What happens is the bushings and the pins on the door hinge wears out. So if you look at the inside of the door here, in the door hinge, there's a top hinge and there's a bushing up top, and at the bottom of that hinge and at the bottom also you can see this pin here in the center, and there's a bushing here, and there's also a bushing up top. Now these tend to wear out, or sometimes you can actually see them split open, or they'll wear, and that causes the play in the hinge. Now, way to check that is if you open the door and grab the bottom of the door here and lift it up and down and just let it drop down, you'll feel that play. It does help to have helping hands, so somebody can lift and drop the door while you're looking at which hinge has the play. We'll go ahead and replace the upper and the lower. Now, a few different ways of doing it. You can certainly remove the fender, remove the whole door, but it's certainly possible to do or with the door on the car and without taking the fender off. We will have to remove this spring, which I didn't want to. I figured we could probably sneak that pin by cutting it off, putting the new one in, but we'll go ahead and remove that spring. I do have a spring compressor with that type of a job. We should be able to remove that spring with this tool. So we'll get that hooked up. First we'll get that spring out. I think it'll be easier to do the top ones first and then do the bottom. Now there's also a lever and a roller which tend to fall apart on these, but mine in this case seems to look okay. There's no issue with that. But once I have the spring out, I'll be able to take a closer look. So what I've done here is a small jack with a wood block on the back end of the door, just to take the weight off of our bottom hinge so we can remove that pin. If we look at our new pin here, you can see it has some type of a locking mechanism here. It's a locking clip on the pin itself. So our pin on the door will have this, and we'll just take wire cutters or needle nose pliers and just pull that off of there, because that'll prevent it from coming back out from the hinge. So with the screwdriver, I was able to poke through that locking clip that's on the old pin on this bottom hinge, and we're able to pull it off just like so. So now we can take a punch or just a hammer on the bottom of the pin here, and we'll try to pull the pin out from the top here. So I was able to take that spring compressor, compress the spring enough to easily remove it from there. So now we can easily access this roller and the pin. So we'll start working on the upper first. So we will attempt to change the upper and the lower door pins on this without removing the door. Obviously you can pull the fender and you can remove the whole door by removing the hinges. So here I have some of the door pin kits. Now this kit by Dorman just has the lower pin, and has the bushings, and it also has the bushings for the rollers. Now there's a separate kit that you can get that will have that same pin with the bushing, and it'll also have the uppers here too. I got one of them out already. So I was able to take this carbide bit on this multi-tool and cut the upper pin, or on the upper hinge, the top pin and the lower pin. And as you can see, I have the new bushing in here. Now remember, the bushings actually sit in between the two hinges. on the upper and lower. Actually, the other ones are the same way. So here are the old pins that I was able to cut from the upper hinge. Here's the bushing. One wasn't too bad. One of them did break on me pulling it apart. That might happen. So with the upper pins cut, you are able to move the door outwards from the hinge, and you can take a screwdriver or a chisel and pop the bushing out from the bottom, obviously on that one, and on the bottom one it goes the other way. So now that we have those out, we'll get the new ones in, and then we'll do the same thing with the bottom pin. We'll just go ahead and cut it, pop it out. The new replacement pins for the upper hinge. Now original ones are obviously like rivets, so that's why we're cutting them off. The replacement, same style just about, but instead of having them riveted, you have a nut that will secure them. We have our bushings in place. Here's the upper and the lower one in from the bottom. Remember, it goes in between the hinges here. Now we can get that hinge in position and get our pin put back in from the bottom on this and from the top on the other one. So let's get that done, and we'll move on to the bottom pin. So I was able to go ahead and install both bushings and pins on the upper hinge. Make it easier to remove this corner of the seal. Now mine is so dried up, it just broke off. I plan on changing those anyways. You can see how bad it is on this end. It's already missing pieces and it's just super brittle. So again, that does help to remove a screw and remove that corner of that seal. You can reach these pins way better to tighten them, or even when you're cutting. So now that the upper is done, we're working on the bottom one. I was planning on cutting it here, but halfway through I noticed the pin was loose enough. I was able to just take my channel locks like this, grab it from the top, and just lightly hammering the channel locks. I was able to just go ahead and drive it up. So it's out from the bottom. We just need to pull it rest of the way up. We'll go ahead and remove that and change the bushings that's in between the hinge here, and up top, of course, underneath. We'll get those changed, get the new pin in. Guys, with the pins out from the bottom hinge, I just got a punch sitting in there with the door open. Now, I was able to do the uppers without removing fender or the door or the hinge, but the lower seems to be kind of tight. I was able to get the pin out, but I cannot get the door to move in or out enough to get the bushing out. So we're going to have to unbolt this hinge. So I've removed the kick panel. There's two bolts that go right through here into the hinge, and there's one that goes from the outside to inside. Now what we're going to do with that is we'll close the door. Now I really didn't want to remove the whole door or the fender. Now I happen to have the wheels off, the car's on jack stands, and I got this inner fender liner that's removed. So I should be able to go in through here and remove that bolt on the hinge, and I should be able to remove that hinge, leaving the door where it's at, replace the bushings, and then open the door and get the pin back in. Let's see how that works out. We have the inner hinge removed. That's fairly easy to reach right through the wheel well here and remove the hinge. Now that we have this portion off, we should be able to replace the rollers if we need to, get the new bushings in here, and we'll bolt it back in and put the pin in. So I figured while I have the hinge off, I should probably replace this roller too, the rolling pin. Now this is supposed to come out from there. The roller broke off of it. It's jammed in there pretty good, so that's most likely not going to move. I've tried heating it, soaking it, so we'll end up cutting this end off and removing this whole pin out of there, and we'll put the new replacement one in. So I actually took the hinge and just a bolt here and mounted it to a wood block like this, and I was able to heat it just with some propane, and I did get that pin to come out from there. Basically what I did was I took a grinder, put a little slit in it so I could actually take the chisel, keeping it like this up against the wood block just like this, and hammering that pin out this way. It was pretty stuck in there, so by heating it and hitting it with the chisel at an angle, it did eventually come out. It is a lot easier just to change that roller and that pin instead of cutting this out. I mean, it's doable if that's what you have to do, but I just didn't want to wait. It was easier and quicker to get the roller and the pin. So I have the hinge all wire brushed here, and I think I'll give it a coat of paint before we install the bushings and the roller pin. Coat of paint on our hinge and the bushings installed. I was able to push those in just with a rubber hammer or plastic hammer. And we also have the new pin and the roller, and we'll get that installed into here. I'm just planning on putting this piece on a piece of wood, and we'll see if we can hammer that in and get that. So here we have the pin and the roller installed. Took quite a bit of hammering on that piece to get that into place. Everything moves freely. Now we'll go ahead and install this hinge onto the vehicle through the wheel well here, and we'll get the pin put back into the door. So we have the hinge back in place, tightened up. All we have left to do is to install the spring behind this bar. We got our door pin back in just by hammering it from the top. So we'll take this spring, put it in position, and release it. So we have the spring reinstalled behind this bar here. Everything's nice and tight. Now the door closes perfect. No more noises. No more scrapes at the bottom. And the gap seems to be much better here. So that is achievable. We'll change all the bushings without removing the fender. So I will put all the parts and everything we use in the description for you. If you have any questions, comments, please let me know. I thank you for watching.